We continue our theological discussion of monsters by beginning at the beginning with the OG, the original gods. We'll examine how our creation legends affect and reflect our sense of self-worth, and also consider the role our self-awareness, or maybe lack thereof, plays in organizing society. Our view of creation and creators shapes much of who we are and the way we act. The oldest existing creation story for which we have a written record is the Enuma Elish. We have fragments from as early as 1200 BCE, but they indicate the story was circulating much earlier, perhaps as early as 2000 BCE. It's probably Sumerian in origin, and there's near universal scholarly agreement that the Enuma Elish massively influenced the Bible's Genesis, which is both an adaptation and rebuttal, actually. The Enuma Elish begins with a universe of chaotically swirling water. Eventually, this unformed, chaotic, swirling quantum foam divides like a cell into two cosmic dragons, the freshwater Apsu and the saltwater Tiamat. These two primordial bodies of water merge and create the first gods, Lamu and Lahemu, who begin to form the universe by having their own children, who then claim control of the land, the seas, and the heavens, until ultimately many gods are ruling the cosmos. Eventually, the noise of all of these gods becomes too much for Tiamat, who's finally driven to the limit by all the cacophony and all the commotion that the kids are causing. So, Apsu unsuccessfully tries to calm the children and calls in one of their sons, Mummu, to help. Mummu decides that the best course of action is to destroy all the other gods, and Apsu agrees. Well, Tiamat is horrified by this plan and opposes it, so she anoints a champion, Kingu, who keeps Apsu at bay but really can't defeat him. Eventually, Apsu's great-grandson, the god Ea, the god of wisdom, uses a spell to subdue Apsu and keep him imprisoned in a sort of death-like state of sleep, very similar to Sheol. In some later versions of the story, Ea even uses magic to subjugate Apsu and then decapitates him. So the chaos begins to settle, and Ea and his wife have a son, Marduk. The god Marduk is a favorite child of the gods. They give Marduk the winds to play with as a toy, but the winds stir up trouble on the salty seas, enraging Tiamat. So Tiamat and her new husband, the god Kingu, conveniently the one who fought for her in battle, and then a group of other gods to which she's given birth with Kingu, they swear revenge not only for Marduk's messing around with the winds on the saltwater, but also Ea's treatment of Apsu. Well, the old gods are terrified at facing Tiamat's army, with Kingu at its head. They don't know how they could possibly defeat it. So Marduk speaks up, offering to fight for the gods and defeat Tiamat and Kingu on one condition, which you can probably guess, that he be made absolute king of the gods, having even the power of life and death over his fellow divinities. Well, before granting Marduk this sort of awesome kind of power, the rest of the gods test him by creating a new constellation in the heavens. They challenge Marduk first to destroy the constellation and then to restore it. Well, Marduk passes this test, and the gods agree to his conditions. Marduk goes to battle then armed with a mace, bow and arrows, and a net. Marduk faces the dragon Tiamat in single combat. He catches her in his net and dispatches her with an arrow. Marduk then cuts up Tiamat's body and uses it to construct the dome of the sky, as well as the various other natural phenomena that we see around the world. He then buries her head under a mountain and pierces her eyes, which become the source of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. In this way, Marduk demonstrates his absolute mastery over the natural world. So, Marduk pardons the gods who fought with Tiamat, except for Kingu, but demands that as penance they construct for him a royal city, Babylon, and a temple in it from which to rule. Marduk also convenes a council of the gods where Kingu is tried and executed. After consulting with Ea, the god of wisdom, remember, to free the gods from further toil or manual labor, Marduk commands that the gods use Kingu's corpse to construct the first humans, designed as slaves to do all the manual labor. These new beings are created solely to serve the gods. The epic ends with the construction of Babylon and a feast at Marduk's temple, where the rest of the gods formally proclaim him their king. I think it's pretty easy to see how the Enuma Elish massively influenced theologians for thousands of years, including the Hebrew authors of Genesis, whose ancestors undoubtedly knew the Sumerian myth. And we also have to remember that Genesis was likely not written down for at least a couple of thousand years until the Jewish leadership found themselves, guess where, in Babylonian exile, where Marduk was still reigning supreme, reminding the Jewish exiles of their not too distant past and the importance of recording it for posterity. The Jewish people took the Enuma Elish and made some critical and lasting theological innovations, including what some scholars claim is the concept of creation ex nihilo, from nothing. Others maintained that the first line of Genesis, when God began to create the heavens and the earth, implies something pre-existent from which God created. They also argue that their understanding is more consistent with the Enuma Elish and the general cultural concept of the era of a watery firmament. However, I'm in the camp with other scholars who think that Genesis is in many ways a rebuttal of the Enuma Elish. Like many of us today, Jewish folks thousands of years ago also wondered, can anything pre-exist? If the gods came from a body of water, what made the body of water? And what made the body of water? And so on and so on and so on. I know we've all gone through these sort of intellectual machinations about God. So, in perhaps the world's first attempt at scientific reductionism, the authors of Genesis realized that when we can finally stop asking what or who made this, perhaps that's where God is. While pondering creation from nothing is an important and valuable spiritual exercise, the original Genesis storyteller's most enduring and perhaps most crucial theological contribution, though, is their understanding of humans not as the gods' slaves, but as God's creative covenant partners. In Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through 27, we read, "Then God said, 'Let us make humanity in our image to resemble us, so that they may take charge of the fish of the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the earth, and all the crawling things on earth.' God created humanity in God's own image. In the divine image God created them, male and female, God created them." Now, notice the language here because it's essential and I think we tend to gloss over it too often. God speaks in the plural. It's all us and we and our. God creates humans in the divine images, indicating that Jewish monotheism included a Babylonian-style divine council, at least when Genesis was first being told. However, in another innovation, unlike Marduk, who enslaves both humans and gods, the Jewish idea of the supreme creator, of God, is of a being who is delighted to share power with us. God puts humans in charge of the planet, treating us as valuable partners and caregivers, even involving us in naming things as they're created. Adam and Eve name all the livestock, all the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals, according to Genesis 2:20. That's a stark contrast to the dystopian view of humanity just a millennium or so earlier. I think it's worth remembering that the God billions of us around the world still believe in is a response, a rebuttal to old ideas about vengeful, nasty, enslaving deities. Especially today, when so many people seem to think God is full of ire and spite. I mean, where are we living? Babylon? Once, long ago, perhaps in the real Babylon, our ancestors sacrificed our sense of cosmic enslavement to maniacal overlords on the burnt altar of useless, destructive gods. I say, let's keep them there. The age of gods and demagogues must end. We are co-creators with God. It's time to use that power constructively. It's beyond time to imagine our world differently, as radically different as our Jewish ancestors imagined a God of endless love when everyone else only saw gods of terror. Amen. Question to ponder today is how comparing the stories of different religions inspires your faith journey. How does sort of comparative religion and understanding aspects of different belief systems around the world inspire your individual faith journey? As usual, I'll send you into breakout rooms for a few